Touchdown, Alabama, let's get it.
The process, no one can stop this. Hottest show in the streets, I bet you can't top this. Rammer, jammer, yellow hammer, come see how we rock this. Alabama fans the best, there's no way you can top this. Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
The process.
Welcome into The Process, Crimson Tide Recruiting. I am your host, Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama magazine. Thank you guys so much for joining me today on our YouTube page. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button on our YouTube so you can stay updated on all of our content. As always, you guys can check out The Process every Tuesday and Thursday right here on our YouTube. But on this episode, I wanted to analyze the Tide's 2021 recruiting class here a bit and break down a couple of position groups who may be the Tide's best position group in its 2021 recruiting class. A couple of groups that may be pushing for us to get that title of being the Tide's best group here in this 2021 recruiting class. Of course, I am going to talk about a position group that has Tide fans very excited, but I am also going to talk about a couple of other groups who you may should take a look at as well. But before I get a chance to analyze those position groups on this episode of The Process, I do have to keep you guys updated on the Tide's latest football recruiting news. So that is what we are going to dive into next. So with that being said, let's get the process started. I have a few recruiting updates to hit you guys with today. The first being the Tide offering 2022 4-star outside linebacker Jalen Walker out of Georgia. Also, Tide fans need to set their DVRs or tune into ESPN on Friday night as two Tide commits in Ja'Cory Brooks and JC Latham will kick off their senior seasons for IMG Academy live on ESPN at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Time, which is the kickoff time from Florida. So get a chance to see a couple of Tide commits in action. As I said, set your DVR as JC Latham, the 5-star offensive tackle, and Ja'Cory Brooks, the 4-star wide receiver out of IMG Academy, compete in their first game of their senior seasons live on ESPN. But as I said at the top of the show, I wanted to break down some position groups and analyze these position groups as they will be fighting for the title of the position group that is the best for the Tide here in this 2021 recruiting cycle. The first group I want to discuss here is the Tide's defensive back group. I feel this group is a bit slept on at the moment because it includes a couple of sleepers. First, looking at Kadarius Callaway, the 3-star athlete from Philadelphia High School in Philadelphia, Mississippi. This is a kid who stands at 6 foot and weighs 210 pounds, has more of a running back frame at the moment, and in my mind, I think he has not reached his full potential, or he is not even near his full potential as a defensive back because he does not really have time to just focus on being a defensive back. Work on the technique that goes into being a great defensive back at the collegiate level because he plays so many different positions for Philadelphia High School. They use him on both sides of the football. They use him to return punts and also return kicks. So I think he can reach his full potential once he gets an opportunity to just focus on defensive back. So we do not know how good Kadarius Callaway is as a defensive back. He may be all worldly once he gets a chance to focus on being a defensive back. Then you look at Devontae Smith, the 4-star defensive back out of LaSalle High School in Cincinnati, Ohio. You are getting a kid who's very versatile, has the opportunity and has the ability to play cornerback and safety at the next level. A guy who can play so many different positions within the secondary, and I think that is one of the reasons that the Tide's coaching staff is really excited that they have him on board. Then you have Kane Williams, a big body safety from Louisiana, a guy who can add some more muscle to his frame and just use his big frame to grow into a physical safety at the next level. A guy who could possibly play closer to the line of scrimmage, grow into a position that plays closer there, for example, as a linebacker or so moving forward. But looking at Kane Williams, he's a guy who can definitely fit that. Then you go to Kyrie Jackson, the JUCO defensive back who has all of the tools, a very technically sound defensive back at 6'3", a kid who's not afraid to come downhill and lay a guy out, not afraid to make contact. And when you look at those four guys, this group has the potential to be really good. But when you look at the Tide's recruiting board, the best when it comes to this defensive back group may be yet to come. When you look at the Tide's recruiting board, it is loaded with defensive backs at the moment with the guys that they are recruiting. You look at JaQuincy McKinstry, who will remain a priority target for Alabama as long as he is on the board. Terrion Arnold, who will also remain a priority target for Alabama, along with a couple of other schools, which he has a top 11 at the moment as he plans to continue taking his recruitment slowly. You also look at Jordan Gilbert, a 4-star defensive back out of Louisiana. Kamari Lassiter, a 4-star defensive back out of American Christian Academy in Tuscaloosa. So this group has a chance to improve, and I think once they add that last piece, I think they're looking for another piece or possibly two other pieces. But once they add those final pieces to this group, I think this group is going to be right in that conversation when you talk about which group is the best for the Tide here in this 2021 recruiting class. The next group I want to talk about here is another group the Tide may not be done with here in this 2021 recruiting class. And I am talking about the wide receiver group, as the Tide currently has 3 verbal commitments from wide receivers in this class, with AJ Hall, Christian Leary, and Ja'Corey Brooks being verbally committed to the Tide at the moment. Starting off here with AJ Hall, the 5-star recruit out of Florida. We have him listed as a 5-star recruit on Touchdown Alabama magazine. Be sure to check out our own independent recruiting rankings. The link will be in the description of this video. Be sure to check out our rankings, as we do have AJ Hall listed as a 5-star recruit, as we have seen him in action a couple of times here. This is a kid who stands at 6'3", a very lengthy wide receiver, a guy with some spring to him, as he has a nice vertical and go up and get the football. This is a kid who also is very, very good in the open field. This is a kid who's elusive with the ball in his hands as well, and he can break away from some guys with his 4.5 40 speed. So this is a great pickup for the Tide here in this 2021 recruiting class. Moving over to Ja'Corey Brooks, a guy who is listed as a 4-star recruit on Touchdown Alabama magazine. And the more I look at Ja'Corey Brooks' film, I feel his biggest strength is his catch radius and his physicality when going up to get the football. I think that is what separates this guy from other wideouts: his physicality, his ability to go up and just snatch the ball away from cornerbacks. And I think that is what is going to separate him at the next level. And of course, you have Christian Leary rounding out this group at the moment, a speedy wide receiver, quite possibly the fastest guy here in this 2021 recruiting class. He told us at Touchdown Alabama magazine that he once ran a 4.39 in the 40-yard dash in an interview that we did with him after he committed to the Tide. Be sure to check out that interview on our YouTube page. But this is a guy with a lot of speed, a guy who destroys angles in the open field, a guy who plays multiple positions for Edgewater High School. He lined him up at wide receiver, of course, at times. He also uses him as a running back, and he also lines up as a Wildcat quarterback in their offense at times. And when I got a chance to talk with the head coach of Edgewater High School, he told me that Christian Leary is a kid that knows their playbook backwards and forth. So this is a kid who spends a lot of time in the film room, learning the offense at Edgewater High School, learning what he needs to do to be successful within that offense. So this is another great pickup for the Tide here in this 2021 recruiting class. But they may not be done here at the wide receiver group. When you look at Brian Thomas Jr., a 6'4" physical wide receiver out of Louisiana, if the Tide could add this guy, this group may rival the next group that I am going to discuss, the last group that I am going to discuss. Of course, the Tide would like to add Brian Thomas Jr. to this group. But if they cannot add Brian Thomas, and if they just want to have these 3 wide receivers be the only wide receivers that they pull in the 2021 recruiting class, I think they will be just fine. Just looking at the amount of talent that AJ Hall and Ja'Corey Brooks and Christian Leary bring to the table. And if the Tide can use that spot for another position, I think the Tide's coaching staff would be just fine with that. But if they can land Brian Thomas Jr., they definitely will take him. It is not too much you can say about this last group, as they have Tide fans across the nation excited to have these four guys verbally committed to Alabama here in this 2021 recruiting class. Looking at the four offensive linemen who the Tide currently have verbally committed, of course you have the Brockermeyer twins, with Tommy Brockermeyer being listed as a 5-star offensive tackle, a guy who is very mobile at that offensive tackle position, a guy who has been trained by his dad, Blake Brockermeyer, to be an advanced offensive lineman, along with his twin brother James Brockermeyer, who has been trained in a similar fashion, a guy who will most likely play center at the next level, but he also has some versatility to his game, as he can quite possibly play guard at the next level as well. Moving over to JC Latham, the 5-star offensive tackle, a very agile offensive tackle, a guy who fits the mold of what an offensive tackle looks like in today's football game, and I think he can really be a great talent at the next level. Adding them on with Terrence Ferguson, a true leader out of Peach County High School in Georgia, another offensive lineman who is verbally committed to the Tide here, and they could quite possibly be a part of the greatest offensive line class ever. I think this will be cemented if the Tide could add a guy like 5-star offensive lineman Omarius Mims. I think if they were able to add Mims to this impressive group, this group will be undoubtedly the best class, the best offensive line class that Saban has ever brought in, at least. And I think this group will be very, very different and very good for the Tide here to add this amount of talent on the offensive line in a recruiting cycle where they really needed to add offensive linemen. And I think the Tide's coaching staff, of course, the Tide's offensive line coach Kyle Flood, will be excited if they can land in Omarius Mims. But of course, they are still targeting a couple of other offensive linemen outside of Mims, looking at William Griffin Parker, who will announce his commitment in a matter of days. Also looking at Eric Cade, another guy to pay attention to. I also broke down some guys just to keep your eyes on a couple of episodes back here on the process, where I broke down some other offensive linemen who the Tide is recruiting as well, along with Mims, William Griffin Parker, and Eric Cade. But there are a couple of other groups here that can work their way into being one of the best groups the Tide brings in here in this 2021 recruiting class. Of course, the Tide has a couple of good linebacker commits when you're looking at Ian Jackson, Deontay Lawson, and also Kendrick Blackshear. If they can add a guy like Xavier Sori, that would be another great group here for the Tide's offensive line, Tide's linebacker group. I mean, when you look at the Tide's defensive line group, you have commitments from Damon Payne, of course, Anquin Barnes, Tim Keenan, Monkel Goodwine. Adding another guy to that group along with Dallas Turner as well. But adding another guy to that group can be very impressive. I think this class has a very impressive defensive line group. I think I could have included them easily here in this segment, but I just wanted to break down 3 groups here. But the defensive line group has a chance to be just as special. When you look at their recruiting board, still having Chambry Jackson, Thomas Shea Dillier, Shemar Turner, Christian Zachary, all of those guys still on the Tide's recruiting board here moving forward. But I just wanted to break down 3 groups who I feel could be the best groups the Tide pulled in here in this 2021 recruiting cycle. That will do it for this episode of The Process. Be sure to hit that subscribe button on our YouTube so you can stay updated on all of our content. Then head over to touchdownalabama.com. Pick up a subscription. With that subscription, you will be able to read all of our subscriber-only articles, our in-depth scouting reports on each commit in the Tide's recruiting classes. Each recruiting class, of course, read our in-depth draft projections and draft analysis of each Alabama player who are currently eligible to declare for the NFL draft. Be sure to check out that as well as part of your subscription benefit. As always, be sure to check out the Touchdown Alabama app as well. Go over to your Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, download the Touchdown Alabama app so you can stay updated on all of the latest Alabama football recruiting news with notifications sent to your mobile device. As always, I am Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama magazine.